Welcome back to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. Legal services company Morgan Drexen and another plaintiff filed a lawsuit on Monday against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, claiming that there are questions about the agency's constitutionality. I spoke yesterday with lawyer Randy Miller, who's representing the plaintiffs. Have a listen. Welcome to the show, Randy. So lots of questions surrounding the CFPB, its constitutionality. There's already been one court challenge. Now you're filing another one. Why?
Good afternoon, Mary. It's great to be here. We are filing a lawsuit today because, Mr. Cordray has just been appointed. So the CFPB requires a Senate-confirmed director. Now they've got one, and we're particularly concerned. We've been working on an issue with the CFPB for quite a while now. We're particularly concerned now that they have their director. They're going to leap into action, and we have some problems. Okay,
now I understand the case concerns legal services. I thought that the CFPB didn't have jurisdiction over the practice of law. So what exactly is the agency claiming?
Well, that's the problem. They're trying to do things that's beyond their power and jurisdiction. We see them trying to do two things that are troubling. One is regulation of lawyers who are practicing law. Then the other is collecting personal financial data from individual Americans in a way that doesn't effectively balance privacy concerns.
But Randy, the CFPB may say, look, Dodd-Frank created us. We were set up to be unaccountable. That's what Congress intended. A majority of congressmen put this law through, even if there were no Republicans. So how do you answer that?
Well, Mary, thank God that we have a Constitution that limits the power of Congress, right? And our concern is that they, in their quest to make a very independent agency, they made this agency a little bit too independent, a little bit too isolated, a little bit too insulated, so that there's not effective congressional or presidential oversight, and there's not effective internal checks and balances like there would be if there was a multi-member commission like the FTC or SEC. All of that combined gives rise to a constitutional violation. The Constitution requires, and the Supreme Court has said this in a series of cases over the past 100 years, that when you create a federal agency of government, there has to be both political accountability and internal checks and balances, and we don't have that here.
Okay, now the case that's already outstanding against the agency has questions of standing. The company in that case, brought by C. Boyd & Gray lawsuit, said, well, you're not really involved here. Your case, is there a question of so-called ripeness? In other words, has the company that you're representing really been harmed yet by the agency? Is that a problem for your side?
Yeah, I think our case is a little bit different because we've been the target of a CFPB investigation. And so we actually have in our hands a subpoena from the CFPB that requires us to produce confidential records given to us in the context of an attorney-client confidential consultation, and it happens to be personal financial information. So we're caught between the dilemma here. On the one hand, if we comply with this government agency subpoena and just turn this stuff over, we might be violating our privilege and violating our clients' rights to privacy. But if we don't comply with the subpoena, this agency could argue that we're in contempt, that we have to pay penalties, that we're facing other sanctions for not complying. So what we're asking the court to do is to take a look at this constitutional question I described, the constitutional structure of the CFPB, and put all that on hold until such time as the court can evaluate the constitutional
Randy,
issue.
We've got about 30 seconds left. What other kinds of companies should be watching this case and its outcome?
Anyone really who's regulated by the CFPB ought to be watching this case and the other case that you mentioned, because eventually the court here, the federal court in the District of Columbia, hopefully, will look at the ultimate issue. Is the CFPB structured in a way that complies with the United States Constitution? I understand that in the first case you mentioned there's standing to sue issues. In our case there might be other issues, but ultimately we're hoping that the court will look at that issue. There's no other court in the country that can do it but this one.
Okay, well, we're certainly going to be watching the case closely. Randy Miller, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks for having me, Mary.